Welcome to the D&D Fitness Radio podcast, brought to you by your hosts, Don Saladino from New York City and Derek Hansen from Vancouver, Canada. In episode 2, we speak with Jeff Zeilstra of Fatigue Science, a Vancouver-based sleep monitoring and fatigue management company. Hey, Don, just wanted to touch base with you. We're in our second episode, and I know you're kind of snowed in today. So
yes,
I think that's a perfect opportunity to just bog down and just record some podcast content.
Well, just being very clear, I got my car this morning to go to work, and within 10 seconds, I turned around, pulled into my garage, went in, kind of got my morning, passed out for a half hour, which is pretty nice. And then I found a way to actually get to the gym. So couldn't make it to work, but was able to get to the gym.
Priorities.
Those are my priorities. I'm literally, if it was typically a 15-minute car ride to my gym, because I like going to a gym outside of my town. Probably took me about 45 minutes today, but I got it done. Hey, I feel great.
Well, you got it covered. You got exercise, you got diet. I see how much broccoli you eat every day.
Yeah, it's getting a little tough.
But my question is, are you getting enough sleep?
I am getting enough sleep. So, you know, it's funny because with the way that I work and going, up at 4 a.m. every morning, I'm in bed no later than 9. So I pretty much go 9 to 4, if I'm lucky, 9 to 5, which I know isn't great. There's a lot of questions I want to ask our guest here today, Jeff, about ideal sleeping patterns and, but I'm doing the best that I can with my work schedule. So I typically try and get anywhere from 7 to 9 hours a night. And if I get under that 7-hour mark, I just don't feel right. I'm one of these guys too, who need to get more. If I get 9.5, I feel better. I don't feel groggy. I try and take advantage of it as much as I can when I can. But these are, again, questions I'm getting ahead of myself that I'm going to want to ask Jeff today, because I know the public wants to know what is the right amount of sleep. So we're introducing Jeff. Jeff, thanks for being on, bud.
Yeah, guys, thanks for having me on board today. I'm fired up this morning.
Yeah, we have lots of questions, and I know I go through all the recent research and articles, and some stuff in there, it looks like it's good. Some stuff, I don't know. But, I went through a bunch of the articles and I sent some of them through to you guys. And there's everything from like how much sleep do we need, like Don says, energy, fat loss, intellectual abilities, mental health, and just general health, in regards to sleep. And I know we talk a lot about sports performance as well. So
my first question is this, Jeff, just for the general public, what is the range of hours a night that we need?
Yeah, Don, you're not far off in what you mentioned. Typically, when you talk to anyone in the research, sleep research, medical community, that's 7 hours minimum is sort of the number, and typically everyone will say 7 to 9. But keeping in mind that everyone is different, right? And if you're a guy, Don, that you feel better when you extend your sleep. Then that's ultimately it's an individual thing. Now the challenge obviously with that is people have to go to work in modern society. There's things that prevent us from getting that sleep extension, so to speak. So to keep it simple, anywhere from 7 to 9 in the research shows you're going to have you're going to reap some of the benefits of sleep. So.
I mean, this is one of my favorite topics, so I might get a little robotic here and start firing stuff off. But so if you don't mind, just to kind of get some of this stuff out of the way for our listeners. But the sweet spot. So the hour that there is an hour at night that you want to be in bed by, correct? And there is an hour that you want to try and extend your sleep past. Is there any research that you believe in that's true, that's not true? What's your opinion on that?
Yeah. Excellent question. We tackle a lot of this stuff pretty regularly with athletes and folks that I work with in the military and so on. And this idea that not everyone is equal in terms of something called chronotypes. So you could be a morning person or an evening person. So if you're one of those people that you find you're up at night and you do some of your best work in the evening, then we have to make sure that again, you're extending your sleep more into the morning. And then some people, perform better or feel better when they go to bed earlier and get up early in the morning. So you have sort of those two different chronotypes. And keeping in mind as well that, the body naturally produces, hormone melatonin, which you and your listeners are probably have heard of before, but it's that hormone that, gives you that sense of sleepiness and puts you to sleep. So typically that happens in the evening around, 9-10 o'clock at night. And that's when, for the average adult, that seems to be kind of that sweet spot. We like, just in general terms, before 11 a.m. is probably ideal for most individuals. But again, it's knowing your body and seeing what works for you. Again, back to the issue with modern society as well as the influence of artificial light. So lights,
Right.
smart devices, and screens. Now we're tricking our bodies to not produce melatonin because we think it's daytime, and now we have that delay in trying to fall asleep, and it also impacts our sleep quality. So there's a whole thing with like for myself, I've got young kids. Sometimes when I pick them up at school, I've got to get on my computer and work in the evening, right? So there's this whole modern second shift work, they call it, happening as well, that again delays our sleep and impacts our quality and so on.
So what do you? Sorry, Derek. So what do you? So what do you recommend as for getting off your handheld devices? So if you're saying that affects melatonin level, that's going to affect sleep quality, and probably one of the first things I tell people to do who want to improve sleep quality, I tell them to get off their iPhones or get away from bright light. But is there a window? Is it like a half an hour, an hour? What do you recommend?
Yeah, typically it's anywhere from an hour to 2 hours. We recommend this. This is also it's similar to caffeine in that it's somewhat individual, right? I'm a type of guy that can have an espresso at 7-8 o'clock at night, and it
Not me.
doesn't impact me. Some people are a little bit more sensitive to light and so on. But typically an hour to 2 is what a sleep expert would tell you. The reality is, guys, we work with a lot with professional athletes and amateur athletes, and you can get up in front of a room and tell them, guys, turn off your phones 2 hours before bed and all these things, and again, the reality is that they're not going to do that. So if they're not going to get off their phone, what's the next best thing? And for us, we look at some other strategies. So maybe some eyewear, some blue light blocking type glasses.
Oh,
interesting. Like, hey guys, you're going to be on your phone at night. Let's at least minimize the impact of the blue light, because it's, we want to come up with, suggestions or strategies that are realistic for these guys. Right. So that's one big one that we've seen a lot of teams move towards is outfitting their athletes with these eyewear, these glasses that kind of block that blue light.
Yeah. So let's talk about the team thing. And it sounds like, as a sleep expert, you're looking for everybody's sleep G spot in many ways, right? Like trying to get them to get the best results for their individual situation. Now with the teams, you have all these guys who, probably a lot of them are ADHD and they don't focus very well. And maybe they are having energy drinks and on their phones. Like, how do you manage that situation, especially for pro athletes who maybe don't want to listen to somebody like yourself?
Yeah, it's there are so many things going on that would, in an athlete, in a pro or amateur athlete's life, and just like, everyday people as well, right? And we've got everything from young athletes that are gamers, right? They go home and they play video games, right? So it's not like they're going out and they're partying and they're just robbing themselves of sleep because they're gaming, and oftentimes they're gaming against each other, right? So we have a generation that of athletes that want to do that. We have guys, everything from energy drinks abuse to pre-workout too late at night, and it's impacting. They can't wind down. You've got game times at 7 o'clock. Sometimes the games end at 10, 11 o'clock, depending on of course the time zone and whatnot, then they can't wind down or they're eating a heavy meal. So you've got all these things that factor in. And in terms of being able to get that message across to the guys, it's really for us, and where we kind of play in this is, let's collect some data with them and have a discussion and kind of see where they're at, whether it's the timing, the quality that's off, and then work on some things that are going to work for them, right? And then it's much like Don, with what you do with your clients, or Derek with you with athletes. It's not this blanket approach for everyone, but figuring out a way to get this message across to that individual. We've had pro teams look at the sleep analytics and the information from our platform and try to look at in-game statistics and get that message across to the players to say, hey, look, when we eliminated some sleep debt, or we extended our sleep for 3 or 4 nights, this was the result on the field, on the court, and so on. So there's different, more creative ways teams are trying to get at the athlete. But at the end of the day, sleep is just one. It's an important piece of the puzzle, but like nutrition and like training, it's one piece. And we're essentially trying to educate the athlete that this is a 24-hour thing now. And you can't just, work out hard with you guys in the weight room, eat a healthy meal at the facility or take some supplements and then go out and get shitty sleep and expect to be fully recovered. Right. So, and then with guys like yourself, our performance staffs who use our technology, it's this idea that, hey, we have a pretty good idea of how hard they're working out and on the field, their training loads. We use other technologies to measure things. We can feed them when they're with us at the facility, but we have no idea what happens when they walk out of here. And having that, closing that loop in terms of recovery and sleep, having that data point allows us to understand that athlete's readiness a little bit.
That's all. I always say that. I say training, I think, is the easiest part of the equation. Whoever I'm getting ready, and I work. I've worked with my share of athletes, but I work more now with people who are getting ready for the movie screen, and I feel like it's almost a little complex because they're doing a lot of their own stunts now. Ryan Reynolds, believe it or not, does a lot of his stunts in Deadpool, whether people are CGI, he's coming back with broken bones, and I see what he's going through. So their bodies have to function a certain way. They have to look a certain way. But the training and the nutrition part, I find it to be the easiest because it's so easy to control in handing someone their food. It's so easy to control by handing them their template. And then obviously you deviate off their template day to day. I think that's what makes a good coach. But, it's that other 23 hours a day. And a big portion of that 7 to 9 hours, what we're saying should be when you're knocked out. I mean, with the non-athletes and celebrity, I've always struggled with alcohol consumption. People are always asking me about the caloric intake of alcohol, and it's kind of what I worry least about. I'm more worried about how it disrupts their sleep and it disrupts their hormones. I mean, now I'm starting to feel old because you're telling me that your big problem is your guys gaming. Back when I was in college, our coaches were trying to keip us out of the bar late at night. Now you're saying you're trying to keep them away from the Xbox, which is kind of funny.
You're so old school, man.
Now I just turned 40. You guys are making me feel it. But yeah, I mean, alcohol consumption. I know you probably can't go into a lot of detail, but in your experience, I mean, can you talk to everyone about what is that doing to your sleep pattern, and then what is that doing to your hormones? I mean, I think this is really interesting.
Yeah, the alcohol is still a big one, Don, and I mentioned the gaming. It was just more because I was fresh off a conversation with a couple coaches this morning talking about some of their athletes who are struggling with this, managing their sleep and whatnot. But alcohol is still quite prevalent, and the guys, let's be honest, they're young athletes. A lot of them are making a good living. They're out in fun cities like New York and Vancouver here, and so they're going to go out and have a good time after games. I think it's just in terms of like the data that I've been exposed to over the years, obviously what you said, and it's not really a secret, the alcohol will impact the sleep quality. We kind of describe it as junk sleep, your body sort of skips over these restorative parts of the sleep cycle, so to speak. So even though you're out, you may be perceived as I'm out. It's really just kind of garbage sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Now there is a bit of a sweet spot, right? So, and this again is individual. If, we talk to a lot of athletes who've been in, the NFL for 10 years, and they say, look, man, I just need to have a glass or two of wine at night, and it helps me kind of wind down psychologically. Makes me feel good. And, so having 2 drinks maybe for most people is maybe a good thing, and it helps them wind down. But you run the risk when you go into that 4, 5, 6 drinks. Now you're in that zone where it could be, kind of prohibitive in terms of getting that restorative sleep. So again, it's a little bit individual, but yeah, the data that I've seen, and when we see guys abuse alcohol, you can see it in terms of the disruptions, the wake episodes, and so on in the report. So
I had a client recently, Derek. I haven't told you this yet, but
you're keeping secrets from me, Don?
I'm keeping secrets from him. We're too busy snowboarding. Derek's hitting the slopes every day now.
Sore today.
No, at least he didn't fall too hard. Hopefully, he didn't fall too hard. So I had a client recently. He went to Park City, Utah, and he, he's not a big drinker, but he enjoys, 1 or 2 glasses a night. And but he was a poor sleeper. So he's a finance guy, would get into the gym at 6 a.m., goes to Park City, continues to drink the same amount of alcohol. His diet really doesn't change much. He wasn't skiing. It was at a specific time of year where I don't think there was any skiing going on. So it's not like he was working out anymore. He basically just said his lifestyle didn't change for the exception of his sleep. And in a little less than a month, he lost almost 10 pounds because he increased his sleep by 90 minutes a night. But I think now I thought that was a high number. I thought that was incredibly impressive. But when you start getting into the research, man, sleep can be probably one of the more valuable fat burners, that most people don't know about. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, sorry, Don. Do you want me to chime in on this one? Or?
Yeah, please.
I think it depends on who you're sleeping with, Don.
Dun.
Oh my God.
Sorry, Jeff. Go ahead, Jeff.
No, it's all good. And that's an awesome example. Yeah, 90 minutes is a huge in terms of being able to go from, make that kind of drastic change. But we work quite a bit with nutritionists or dietitians in the pro and the collegiate space, and we always want our dietitians involved whenever we do any kind of athlete education. Right, the last thing I want to do is come down and work with a team, and then on my way out, I've had it happen where a nutritionist says, "Hey, how come you didn't you guys didn't invite me to this meeting? I talk to the athletes all the time about,
right,
what better foods to eat at night to wind them down and so on." So since then, that happened a few years ago. We always include everyone in these discussions, just like we'd have a psychologist in the room, like a mental skills coach, an athletic trainer, a strength coach, because all of these people can potentially influence and help these athletes, right? So if there's an athlete with anxiety, for example, maybe that's not always the strength coach's sort of domain to help that individual. Maybe we push that over to the mental skills team and so on. But in terms of the sleep nutrition interaction, obviously it's the strength coaches and the nutritionists that usually have the most knowledge in this area. So the basics, and we read this in articles all the time, guys, is that carbohydrates are a primary fuel source for athletes and people that train hard with you, Don and Derek. So when when you go through sleep deprivation, or you build up sleep debt, your ability to metabolize and store the carbohydrates for recovery, it gets delayed or slowed down, right? So and then when you do have sleep debt or you are sleep deprived, you tend to crave carbohydrates, and usually the junk kind, right? Like the chips and the things that the body absorbs quickly. So that's why you see that, the influence of ghrelin, a hormone that makes you hungry and so on, and you throw in cortisol to this mix, where you just get this negative kind of vicious cycle happening, right? Where now you're stressed out, you've got cortisol, you're sleep deprived, you're craving crappy foods, and you're eating that, and then it's preventing you from going to sleep. It's just like a never ending cycle, right? So what you eat can, help you sleep or hinder your sleep as well. And we have some basic recommendations around light meals at night for athletes that are, trying to wind down after a game, what to put in your bodies. We have, you've heard of tryptophan rich foods, pumpkin seeds, turkey breasts, that type of thing. So a lot of interesting stuff around food that can actually help you get into that sleep cycle a little sooner.
I've always done a little bit better with a little bit of carbs in the evening. So I'm a big carb guy. So obviously the right carbs, but I'm prepping for a photo shoot right now. And rather than getting myself in this the state of glycogen depletion, I'm actually consuming about 300 grams a day. Now that's through sweet potato and through some rice and very little fruit. But throughout the year, I'm consuming a lot more carbs than that per day. And I know before bed, sure, I'm not sitting down having 13 grams of sweet potato, but I do get a better night's rest. I do feel that my sleep is a little bit better from adding in a little bit of carbohydrates, an hour and a half before bed, maybe 2 hours before bed, rather than, having my last solid meal at, say, full meal at like 3-4 o'clock in the afternoon, then having dinner at maybe 6:37 and then going carbless on that. And then I find I wake up, my sleep's a little bit more disruptive. I'm waking up groggy. If my training's been really intense throughout the week and I'm doing that, like you said, that cycle of day in and day out, that same thing out of nowhere, I'm feeling more and more lethargic when I wake up. So I think, am I going to be a little less lean? Maybe not. But you guys are working with athletes, and people laugh about this because athletes, it is such a small percentage of the population. But when you look at the general pop out there and the people opening Men's Health and Men's Fitness and reading these magazines, and you have experts sitting there saying, no carbs at night because you're going to bed. You don't need to go to bed with your gas tank full. But then it starts affecting your sleep. Think about the message that we're sending there. For what? Just to wake up in the morning to feel like you're a little leaner when you probably aren't? Let's get some better sleep. So I also think it's what's sexy and what's not sexy, and educating the general population to where they know what questions to ask and know what the right things to focus on. Because if a lot of these people improve their sleep, I'm convinced that they're going to go through the same thing that my buddy Jeff went through by losing that 9-10 pounds in 3 weeks. And I just feel like that we got to do it better. And you're doing it already, but we all got to do a better job in educating people.
Yeah, you're exactly. And the high glycemic index foods, the rices, the pastas, breads, potatoes have actually been shown to promote better sleep in research, right? When they're consumed more, like you said, an hour and a half before bed, just like, protein can help with the sleep quality as well. So these have been proven in research. You've got things like tart cherry juice, organic tart cherry juice now that in the research, and it's pretty incredible stuff that shows, when you're consuming this stuff at night, not only is it helping with getting to sleep, so sleep latency, a little bit of the sleep quality, but it also is, giving you that benefit in terms of, the inflammatory markers and so on. They're seeing, that for recovery, right? So a lot of the teams we work with now, I go in and, whether they have the smoothie bar set up in the cafeteria, you see the single shot tart cherry juice being given out to all athletes, when they're walking out the doors, and especially in the evening after games, right? They want that. For inflammation, but also for these guys to start thinking about, hey, it's time to start winding down and recovering, right? And so that's been a big one that we've seen in the last few years with athletes for sure.
You mentioned melatonin earlier. Now, is that a supplement that you recommend for everyone to take? or is it something that, you know, you're going to become dependent on? Can you give us a little bit of grit on that?
Yeah, for sure. And melatonin, guys, when we have consultants and you know, when I interact with athletes one on one and we go through their data after, you know, 7 days, 14 days, a month, when I sit down with individuals one on one, it's still the number one supplement that is abused, so to speak, in sport. Um, and you know, we typically, you know, this becomes a medical thing, right? Usually, we would make some recommendations if you're crossing multiple time zones and individuals are really out of line with their body clocks. There's definitely a medical case for this. Um, we don't like people taking melatonin every day. I think our chief medical officer would recommend, you know, taking it for 7 days and then they get off it, right? Because your body produces this naturally, and we don't want to be dependent on this. Can kind of mess things up a little bit. So there are specific dosing requirements, and I can get that over to you guys. But for the most part, when I'm with an athlete, I want to know why they have to take that to wind down and get at sort of the cause. Is it something that is stressing them out? Are they anxious about performance, or is there other variables that is causing them to take that? And let's try to get at the root and get off it as soon as possible. But there's definitely a case for it, guys. We always take more of a non-pharmaceutical approach, even though it's not a quote unquote medication. You know, there's going to be a time where, you know, crossing time zones, and if you're really out of whack, then it is good to take some melatonin. Keeping in mind too, and research has shown this, that it is very individual. So it's like the caffeine example I gave earlier. For some people, it works great. Others, they try melatonin and it does nothing. And there's also that sort of that grogginess you have to consider. Some people wake up in the morning, and if you're performing at a high level, or you have a meeting, you might get a little bit of that effect as well. So we have to consider all of those things.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in about the travel. Like, it's kind of a two-part piece, but we haven't really talked about the company you work with. And I have the wearable, the fatigue science wearable that, you know, I've been working with you for the last year or so. Can you talk a bit about the travel piece? Because I know Don had some questions about travel with some of his clients as well. And how complicated can that be if people are traveling across time zones, and how do you manage that?
Yeah, it's we've got a full kind of travel management guide for teams, and it really depends on their geography and the frequency of travel, right? So an NBA team, you know, that's and an NHL team that are playing multiple games a week is different than an NFL team that has one game a week. Typically, if you're on either end, West Coast, you know, crossing more than 2 hours time zone, that's when we really start to dig into it a little bit more. But yeah, all of the recommendations really depend on what the team wants to, how serious they want to go, right? So we have teams that are on the West Coast, and if they're playing in New York, you know, they're going to set up their whole practice routine that week to be on that East Coast time zone, and they're going to travel. We're going to analyze their flight times. We're going to look at with the software that we have access to from the Air Force, sort of those optimal times to get them ready for game time. So everything from some light therapy to well-timed naps are key. We've got all these teams now investing in nap rooms at their facilities.
That's awesome.
Which is great.
Awesome.
We actually, you know, anyone who's going to use our technology usually is on a different level in terms of they've got these rooms. And not only do they have them, but they're in use every time I'm on the ground. They've got coaches in them sending the right messages. Front office are engaged. There's no more of this, hey, we don't need to sleep. You know,
Right.
when I played, I didn't need to sleep. You know, we still have that mentality quite, you know, a little bit, but also again, just tying it back to the travel is, you know, again, let's educate the staff and the players on when to nap, when to not nap, you know, how far in advance do we need to get on that time zone, and so on. It's
So
very,
Jeff,
it's very individual.
But the wearable that you were just pointing to, can you talk about that a little bit? So all your athletes, are they wearing this wearable? Are they wearing this wearable? If that makes sense. Are they all? Do they all have access to this to where you guys are getting data from that? Can you explain?
Yep. So the wearable device that is proprietary to Fatigue Science is called a Ready Band, and our co-founders were a little bit ahead of their time many years ago. So before you heard of a Fitbit or an Apple Watch, they developed a technology that is an actigraph. So it uses motion and some sophisticated algorithms and classification to basically take that motion data and infer different sleep characterizations. So it's your timing, your wake episodes, all of these things that have actually been validated to the gold standard of being in a lab. So we have a wearable that has not only some validation to the tracker, but it also runs all of that data through a biomathematical model that the U.S. Army spent 25 years developing. And our co-founders were smart enough at the time to acquire the rights to this technology and kind of build it into our platform. So we've got real-time fatigue levels based off objective validated wearable technology that gives athletes a sense of their readiness in real time, and as well as the performance staff. And we can track all of these things, if they're crossing time zones and whatnot, again, in a pretty simple way. So all of the data comes into one sort of central dashboard. The athletes get an app to educate themselves. They can see how, the last few days have impacted their fatigue and their readiness sort of rate in
It's giving
real
them
time.
some type of a quantifiable measure to where they're saying, wow, the proof's in the pudding here. Almost something I would love to get on the wrist of my people, because you get into that argument. And it's, well, I don't need, I do fine with 4 hours sleep. I do fine with 5 hours sleep. And I'm looking at them going, no, you don't. Your doctor, but my doctor's saying I'm fine with it. And I'm like, you probably developed some sort of a resiliency or some sort of a tolerance to waking up every day on 3-4 hours rest, which is terrible. And I've seen guys continually gain weight when all they're doing is exercising, working, and actually eating a pretty sensible diet. I've had a handful of guys come in and they just look like that they were, living on cheeseburgers. So this seems like, what is it called again?
It's called a Ready Band. It's by Fatigue Science. It's proprietary to us, and the nice thing is we none of the stuff is things we kind of cooked up in our basement at Fatigue Science. It's 25 years of U.S. Army research lab development. So we've just tweaked the hardware and the software, built an app, and made it a little bit more user friendly for teams and for users to get the data, right? So that's kind of how the whole system works. And we feel that the insights, the detailed insights, are very suitable for the performance staff, medical staff, in order to have a better conversation with the athletes. So you see some trends, you see some information, and we can go and triage accordingly. So an NFL team would use this in training camp for screening. We can't diagnose a medical sleep apnea or disorder, but we can have a pretty good idea for, what someone who's struggling looks like. We have a kind of a red, green, yellow system, some flags in the system, and then we can pass this over to more of a medical person if need be. So different uses, different application. Ultimately, teams that want to build that culture of like, hey guys, we need to take care of this. We're going to provide you with a tool that allows you to get some pretty good objective data, right? And kind of build that for the young guys coming up through the system. By the time they get up to whatever level, the big leagues or whatever it is, they understand that they need to take care of sleep and its impact on their health and performance. So
Yeah, it's a huge awareness tool, because I know when I was visiting Don in New York and I had issues with my sleep, and maybe it was just Don's energy was just keeping me activated the whole time. But yeah, just going through and reviewing the data, it did create awareness and help me modify behavior and just make it really apparent that I had to take charge of when I went to sleep and what I ate and those types of things.
Yeah, just if I can just touch on that too, Derek. And I think the biggest feedback, or one of the most important pieces that I hear back from players and coaches is, if we just tell you, Derek, you had 5 hours last night and 4 hours the night before, and then 8 on Monday, that you should get 7 or 8, but you don't really you don't have any context in what that means for performance, right? So we take all of the accumulated information for the week, and it wraps it into one simple score in a number that is equivalent to a reaction time, so to speak. And that reaction time is really powerful for having a conversation with an athlete and saying, look, you're essentially going into this game, at a slowness and reaction time of 44%, and you're actually at a blood alcohol concentration level of 0.08. So we know that fatigue has that same impact as being alcohol impaired, right? So when we can give that athlete context, it's tremendously impactful for them, and the light bulb kind of goes off, and they decide that if they want to make some modification to their behavior, that's obviously hugely important. So that having a simple number that could be compared to a performance score is pretty huge.
Yeah, because I know Don, you probably work with some really type A people who are goal oriented, but they see sleep as getting in the way of maybe their productivity, like in terms of like, hey, I can only fit this many hours of sleep in because I got all this stuff to do. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, it's ironic because, here they're coming in for our professional opinion, and we're sitting them down. And the first question that I ask them is pretty much, how much sleep are you getting? They're almost a little confused by it. I mean, it really is. I mean, the first two things I think I focus on are sleep and digestion before I even get to training and nutrition. But yeah, I mean, I think when you have to tell someone to make a true lifestyle change, I mean, exercise is easy. Throwing in 4 days a week of 30 to 45 minutes, that's easy to find time. But asking someone to disrupt their evening, go out to dinner and have one cocktail instead of 3, or have to get to bed at between 9 and 10 rather than 12 and 1. I mean, these are I like to just say baby steps. I try moving them maybe 30 minutes in that direction and just start trying to instill good habits, like you said, Jeff said about the devices and cutting down on the light, and just starting trying to feed them and enable them to be a little bit successful in the beginning. There's just nothing, very rarely am I able to come in and do something so impactful where week 1, they're like, oh yeah, I was sleeping 3 hours a night. Now I'm sleeping 7. It's like, it just never really works that way. I don't know about you, Jeff or Derek. I mean, but it definitely is a process.
Yeah, the one thing I wanted to ask you is, I know that I'm constantly talking to players or teams in season, as is Jeff, and we talk about these issues. Now, if we talk about the actors, I don't have anywhere near as much experience with you, but I know these guys could do 12 to 14-hour days, maybe more, during a film shoot, and it's very high pressure in terms of them getting things done in a window of time because there's budgets and things. What are you doing to advise people during those types of periods?
I mean, I'll use an example. Blake Lively, after she had her second child, was shooting a movie where she had to get picked up at her home upstate, and she was getting picked up between 3 and 4 in the morning. And she was working an entire day, and then the car was bringing her back at 7, 8 o'clock at night. I mean, this isn't something, obviously a very attractive woman, a very smart, intelligent woman, but she's on her feet. She's working. She is grinding. I mean, they have, in my opinion, a very, very difficult. I'm not going to say it's harder than a professional athlete's or not, but very rarely are you hearing a professional athlete go through a 12 to 14-hour workday. Maybe if they're going on film, using, analyzing films, et cetera. But, they are, and this is a mom who's raising 2 kids. So it is hard. I mean, I think what we try and explain, especially in situations like that, is you do the best that you can. And I'm trying not to put any more unwanted stress on them. But if it's getting them, if they have a break for 20 minutes to close their eyes and work on some breathing, I'm just having them do that. Is that perfect? Absolutely not. Does the nutrition have to be spot on? Absolutely. I mean, there's other variables that just have to be really, really tight. And I like to tell the people who have to work that way, like myself, if something's got to give. So I can't work the hours that I work and expect to go out and have a cocktail every night. It doesn't work for me. Even with one drink, I wake up the next day and I feel like junk. So I typically don't drink much. It's just, it's my choice. I'm not telling people to do that, but if I want to burn it at one end, I can't burn it at another.
Yeah. What's your experience with that, Jeff, in terms of, hey, somebody has this compressed sleep window, can they drop in a nap? And what has been your experience with that helping?
Yeah, absolutely. And we talked about, teams actually putting in these nap rooms or these, providing these opportunities now for players to sleep, has been huge. And, we have a lot of teams that are believers in the coffee nap, or what Brandon Marcello calls the nappuccino. So it's, have an organic espresso, take the shot, and then go to sleep for 20 minutes. You kind of wake up with the benefit of the caffeine. You don't feel groggy, and you can go out and get ready to play. So we have a lot of teams that will take a well-timed nap. The nice thing with having the objective data, guys, is we look at reports all the time with coaches, and they're always shocked at the timing of these naps. So we have athletes taking a nap at 8 o'clock at night, and then they can't go to bed until 3-4 o'clock in the morning. And then they get up for practice, and then they kind of get into that negative cycle again. Right. So the napping, the timing is critical, in the duration. Right. And one of the football teams, the college teams I was working with in the summer, getting ready for, into September, they knew their players nap. They said, yeah, they told us they nap, but they didn't realize they were sleeping 3 hours at night, and then 3 or 4 in the afternoon after practice, and saying, well, I got 7 hours, right? They were just breaking it up. And so now they had all this visibility into the timing and the quality of those sleep periods. And those are easy things to, not easy, but things that we can go in and tackle right away within, 3 or 4 days. It's not like you need 6 months of data to figure out what's going on. But the napping is key. And you see this, Don, even we work with, some CEO, upper management type people in organizations where they travel a lot for work, and getting them ready for meetings. And, obviously the diet and the nutrition is key. But we talk a lot about sustainable high performance, guys. And, one bad night of sleep typically isn't the end of the world. And we want the athletes to know this as well. If you have a shitty night's sleep, you can still go and compete at a high level and likely train hard. It's this 3-4 nights in a row where you build up the sleep debt. Now we start getting these sort of red flags going off, and we start getting at, risk of injury, performance declines, and so on. So the nice thing with the algorithm that we have access to, it factors in all of that, the accumulation of sleep. And it's not just, okay, one bad night, it's the end of the world. So we take that approach. It's like diet, Don. I've heard you talk a lot about, like, hey, you can go out and, you don't have to be so hardcore, not have a cheat day. Let's moderation here, and let's be realistic. The same thing with sleep. Let's not put pressure on people. If they don't get those 8-9 hours, they're not going to go out and play, right? So having the right messaging to go along with the data is key.
So once in a while, it's all right to push through it if you had a bad night's sleep. I mean, it happens to all of us, and you wake up and you may have an extra cup of coffee and you just want to get in and get it done that day. Once in a while, it's fine. You're more concerned with that cycle of 2-3 nights in a row where that's continually happening. Correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're a guy that has, or a girl who has consistent sleep quality issues, or something's showing up in the data for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks straight, well, maybe that's something that we need to dig in a little bit deeper, right? And find out what's happening. Is it the environment? Is it because you've got new kids at home? Is it stress? And then let's try to go from there. So using the data and actioning it really quickly. Like we don't need a lot of time to be able to move the needle on this stuff and have better conversations. But you've probably, if you don't know anyone who has had sleep apnea or talked to anyone, but they always say, like, I had no idea, I was waking up, 50, 100 times a night. I kind of felt fatigued or tired throughout the day. I just thought that was normal, right? And until they go in and get diagnosed and treated, now they feel like a whole different person. So we have the ability to screen now and get people pick off these athletes or these people now that have gone undiagnosed, right?
So what about someone? So this is really my last big question. Someone who doesn't have access to your team, but just a listener, and they might be struggling to get sleep, proper sleep. Are there any steps that you recommend that they're doing? Maybe it's cutting back on caffeine past a certain hour of the day. Is there like maybe a quick little cheat sheet that you can fill them in on right now on what to follow to help improve it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, caffeine is a big one still. And the understanding the power of caffeine and its half-life is key. So typically, depending again on the individual, 2 o'clock is a good 2 o'clock is a good general time to stop consuming caffeine if you are struggling to fall asleep at night. We talk a lot about rhythms and the body liking consistencies, right? So if you're going to bed at 11 and getting up at 7, that's a good thing. The body likes that routine. We hear of folks in the real world, have social jet lag, right? So it's the weekend warrior types that go out on the Friday night, Saturday night, and then, Monday, Tuesday, everyone feels miserable. That's the social jet lag. So you haven't traveled anywhere, but you've created that jet lag effect by just being out and being social. So that consistency is key, and even factoring that in on weekends. Let's at least be conscious of it. So we're not saying don't go out and have a good time, but just
Right.
be aware of the impact, right? And so the consistency is key. What you're putting in your body, I can't stress that enough, right? So setting yourself up for success. Things like the blue light is huge right now, and this is something that's really causing a lot of issues for people. So again, having a strategy there, whether you're shutting off your screens 2 hours before bed or having special eyewear to wear, these are things that are going to put you in a better spot to sleep. And then in terms of some of the technologies out there, we have people using different apps for meditation. If that's something that works for you and you like that, some mindfulness training, then there's a lot of great apps out there that can help sort of destimulate the brain, so to speak, and wind you down. So that's a good place to start, Don. And
Awesome.
yeah, hopefully that helps some of the listeners.
A couple of those I'll definitely apply to myself. I mean, always trying to figure out ways to get a little bit better, but
Yeah,
I can't.
you and your social jet lag, Don.
All I'm going to be I got to go outside and start shoveling snow soon. That's what I'm going to be doing. So.
I got some great entrepreneurial ideas now, like the sleep cafe, where we're going to have, like, for the power nap, it's going to be the nappuccino, and then, or the nap or whatever. And then we can have the nappe latte, people come in. So, yeah.
I like those pods. I mean, Google was doing it years ago, where they had those sleep pods and people were going in. Even a company I work for now called Garden of Life, when I went down to their facility in Florida a bunch of times, they have this meditation room where people at times just need to go take a nap or meditate or just clear their head. I think this is huge by companies that are actually instilling this now.
Yeah, I was talking to one of my friends who works for a football program, and I said they should just make it like a big football helmet that comes over top of them, right? Put the logo on it. Really cool stuff like that. So.
You're nuts. I love it.
But yeah, thanks a lot, Jeff. There's definitely a lot of information we got out of this podcast, and I know Don probably has a bunch more questions, but definitely this was helpful to get people started and thinking about this stuff.
Huge. And Jeff, listen, thanks. Anytime you're in New York, man, you got to come by the club. We'll go grab lunch. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. I appreciate your time.
Yeah,
Awesome.
and I'll put up some information on fatigue science and the work you're doing, so that people can kind of follow up, and hopefully, it. And this is one last question, but hopefully you guys, can enter the consumer market a bit and have your technology and data and information available for everybody, right? So
that'd be amazing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We can post some links from our site on some resources, and we can talk about how more consumer type folks can get access to the technology. So we do a fair amount of work in corporate space and with some high-end fitness facilities now that are getting their clients access to devices and to learn about this and stuff. So yeah, we can make that stuff available, no problem.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm happy to push and promote it any which way possible. Are you on social? Are you on any social media or no?
Yeah. I'm on social media, just at Jeff Zeilstra on Twitter, and same with Instagram, all that stuff. But I don't have quite the following as you boys. But
no, it's all good.
Yeah, I'm on there. So
I'm just piggybacking on Don, honestly. Come on.
Okay. I'm good for something. Good for something. Well, guys, I can't thank you enough.
All right, guys. Have a good one.